They say power is most dangerous when it hides behind a smile. And when Brother Dusk steps into the room, that smile carries centuries of cruelty, pride, and secrets. He is not just an aging ruler of the Cleonic dynasty, he is its memory, its history, and its ghost. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, his hands hold a new treasure, a gleaming weapon dressed as a toy. It isn't just an ornament, it isn't just a gift, it is a warning. And the moment he shows it, everyone in the Empire will understand that Brother Dusk's story is far from over. The Cleonic dynasty was built on a single promise, that the Empire would never fall, because it would always be ruled by the same man, Cleon, not through one body, but through endless clones. Brother Day, Brother Dawn, Brother Dusk, different ages of the same man, keeping power locked in a perfect circle. But perfection always cracks. By the time we reach Brother Dusk's reign, those cracks are wide enough to swallow everything. Brother Dusk is not the Emperor at his peak. He is the older shadow, the one who has already tasted the throne and now carries the bitterness of losing it. He sits in halls filled with memories, paintings of rulers long gone, statues of Cleons who ruled with cold hands and unblinking eyes. The younger brothers, Day and Dawn, walk with fire in their veins, eager to rule, eager to command. But Dusk watches. And waiting can be far more dangerous than ruling. In Foundation Season 3, we find Brother Dusk standing in the quiet glow of the Imperial Palace. The air around him feels heavy, as though the very walls know his thoughts. He carries himself with calm dignity, but inside, he is restless. Age has not softened his pride, nor has it dulled his hunger. What he has lost in strength, he has gained in cunning. He is no longer the face of the Empire, but he is still its shadow. And shadows have a way of slipping into places light cannot reach. It is in this moment, when eyes are elsewhere on wars, on rebellions, on shifting faith, that Brother Dusk makes his move. He brings forth something new. At first glance, it seems almost harmless. Smooth, shining, almost playful, like a bauble one might hand to a child. But this is no child's toy. This is a message wrapped in metal, symbol crafted to cut deeper than any blade. For Brother Dusk, this toy is not about entertainment. It is about memory, about proving that even in decline, he is still dangerous. The palace whispers of change, of the old Cleon fading into silence. But with this unveiling, Dusk shows he will not fade quietly. The halls that once ignored him must now turn their gaze back. The throne that had moved on must pause. The toy glitters, and with it, Dusk shines once more. And so, the stage is set. The old man, long underestimated, steps forward with a weapon hidden beneath beauty. The Empire does not yet understand what he has brought into their world, but they will. Very soon, they will. The palace was quieter than usual that night. The light from the tall glass windows spilled across the floor, cold and sharp like silver blades. Servants whispered from the corners, their voices barely carried through the hall, as though they too feared to disturb the silence. And in the center of it all, Brother Dusk stood alone. His eyes, sharp despite the lines of age around them, lingered on the object that waited before him. It was not large. It's not towering like the weapons of war that filled the Empire's arsenals. It was small, contained, designed to be held and displayed rather than launched into battle. And yet its presence seemed to press against the walls, filling the chamber with something unspoken, something dangerous. The toy lay within a case of dark metal, locked and sealed, as though even the Empire itself had not yet earned the right to see it. The case was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the light of the room in broken fragments. To any stranger, it might have looked like nothing more than an ornament, perhaps a relic meant for decoration. But Brother Dusk knew better. He knew the weight that rested inside. He had waited long for this moment, crafting it carefully, hiding it from the watchful eyes of Day and Dawn. When his hand finally touched the case, the room seemed to shift. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. He did not rush. He wanted the silence to stretch, wanted every second of anticipation to grow heavier. until even the shadows leaned closer to see what he would reveal. His fingers traced the edges of the seal, and with a single command, the lock gave way. The sound was quiet, but in the stillness of the chamber, it echoed like thunder. The lid lifted, and the first sliver of light touched the object inside. It gleamed, smooth, metallic, almost alive in the way it caught and bent the light. For a heartbeat, it looked fragile, delicate like glass that might shatter with a breath. But then, as Dusk's hands lifted it free, its true weight became clear. This was no fragile thing. This was power, condensed into form. Waiting for a master to wield it, Brother Dusk held it aloft, and in that moment, he was transformed. The lines of age on his face seemed to fade. His shoulders straightened. His eyes burned with the fire of a younger man. To anyone watching, it might have looked like he had been reborn. This was not the shadow of a ruler. This was the hand of Cleon himself, reclaiming what had been lost. The toy was not a sword. It's not a gun, not a weapon of simple destruction. It was something more refined, more insidious. It had been designed to dazzle as much as to threaten. Shining, flawless, beautiful, its danger was hidden beneath the mask of elegance. And that was what made it truly terrifying. A weapon that could hide in plain sight, that could seduce as easily as it could destroy. For Dusk, this unveiling was not about war. It was about theater. It was about showing the Empire and perhaps himself that he was still to be feared. He had chosen this moment carefully, unveiling the object not with a roar, but with a whisper. For whispers can spread faster than shouts, crawling into ears, twisting into stories, and becoming legends before the sun even rises. The toy gleamed in his hands, catching the firelight, casting reflections across the chamber walls. And with each reflection, Brother Dusk saw his own legacy written in shadow and shine. He no longer felt like the discarded elder. No, tonight he was the master of the room, the master of the moment. And the Empire would remember this night, not for speeches, not for decrees, but for the silent unveiling of an object that could change everything. He smiled faintly, though the smile did not reach his eyes. The toy was no longer hidden, and neither was he. The game had begun, and every player in the Empire was now at his mercy. Whether they knew it or not, to call it a toy was a lie, and Brother Dusk knew it better than anyone. It was not built for play, nor for leisure. It was built to speak without words, to command without force. Every curve, every edge, every shining surface told a story. And like all things in the Empire, its story was not innocent. It was layered, poisoned, sharp beneath its glittering skin. In Dusk's hands, the object became more than metal. It became a mirror of his own existence. Once he too had been polished, flawless, the perfect image of Cleon's eternal rule. Once he had commanded armies with nothing but a glance. Once he had been the center of the galaxy, untouchable, eternal. And now, like the toy, he was still gleaming on the outside, but underneath. There was weight, there was danger, there was a hunger to be remembered. The younger brothers, Day and Dawn, would see it as arrogance. A relic from an old man desperate to hold on to power. But that was the surface. Brother Dusk's toy was more than arrogance. It was defiance. It was his way of saying, "You may take the throne from me, but you will not take my shadow. I will haunt these halls even when I am gone." The Empire had always thrived on control. The clones believed themselves unshakable, each generation repeating the same cold perfection. But Dusk's unveiling shattered that illusion. The toy was not just for show, was a challenge to the system itself. For the first time, it suggested that power did not lie only in the crown or the throne. Power could be reclaimed, reshaped, and carried in one man's hands, even if that man was supposed to be fading into silence. Its design carried echoes of history. Some saw in its lines the artistry of ancient Anacreon, others the cold machinery of Thespis. Still others whispered that it was not of this empire at all, but born of forgotten science, something older and darker. To Dusk, it did not matter where it came from. What mattered was what it meant now. And what it meant was simple, that Brother Dusk was still dangerous. Even the way he held it was symbolic. He did not raise it like a weapon, threatening to strike. He cradled it, almost tenderly, like a father holding a child. In that gesture, there was pride, but also cruelty. It said, "This is mine. This is my legacy. Look upon it and understand who I am." To the servants who saw it, the toy was terrifying not because of what it could do, but because of what it promised. It promised that the past would not die quietly. It promised that even in decline, Dusk would not bend. And so the toy became more than an object. It became a statement. A crown not placed on the head, but held in the hand. A throne not sat upon, but carried into the light. With it, Brother Dusk declared war not against armies or rebels, but against time itself. Against the slow fading of memory, against the silence that awaited him. In its reflection, the Empire saw not just a glittering tool, but the truth it had long ignored, that the clones were not gods. They were men. And men, no matter how many times they are copied, still fear being forgotten. The toy sparkled, but behind its shine lay a shadow. A shadow large enough to stretch across the entire dynasty. A shadow that whispered of cracks in the perfect order, of fractures in the endless chain of Cleons. Brother Dusk's toy was not a bauble. It was a warning. A prophecy made metal, and though the Empire did not yet know it, the moment he revealed it, the fate of every Brother Day, dawn. And Dusk alike had already begun to change. The moment the toy left its case, the palace itself seemed to stir. Its golden walls, polished floors, and silent chambers had witnessed centuries of power pass from one brother to the next. But never like this. Never with a challenge hidden inside a gleaming object. What had always been quiet, ritual dawn rising, day ruling, dusk fading, was now disrupted by a single act of defiance. Brother Day was the first to sense it. Though he was not present in the hall when the unveiling happened, the whispers traveled faster than fire. Servants carried the news in hushed tones, guards exchanged knowing glances, and within hours the palace corridors were alive with rumor. By the time Day heard, the story had already grown larger than life. Some claimed Dusk had found a weapon more powerful than the Empire's fleets. Others swore it was a relic from the age before Cleon, something forbidden, something divine. Day's reaction was not anger at first, it was suspicion. For an emperor, suspicion is sharper than rage. Anger can be controlled. Suspicion lingers, festers, grows into fear. And for the man who sat on the throne, the idea that Dusk was plotting behind his back was intolerable. He demanded answers, but answers were slippery things. No one could explain what the toy truly was, and that made it more dangerous. Brother Don's reaction was different. He was still young, still naive in the ways of the dynasty. To him, the toy was dazzling, almost beautiful. He admired its shine, its elegance, its mystery. But beneath his fascination, there was unease. For Don, the toy represented a question he had not dared to ask. If the clones are all the same man, why do they fight to outshine one another? The toy was supposed to mean nothing. It was, after all, just an object. But in Dusk's hands, it became a reminder that even perfection is never equal. That each brother, despite being a copy, longs to be more than the others. The advisors, meanwhile, were divided. Some saw it as harmless, a desperate attempt by an aging brother to hold on to relevance. They laughed in private, mocking the way Dusk cradled it as though it were his heir. Others, however, were not so quick to dismiss it. They knew that power often hides in symbols. A crown is nothing more than metal and jewels until someone bows to it. A flag is nothing but fabric until armies march behind it. And this toy, whatever it truly was, had already begun to gather weight. The conflict did not explode openly. No swords were drawn, no armies clashed. Instead, it sank like poison into the veins of the Empire. Day began to watch Dusk more closely, his every word weighed, his every move measured. Dawn, caught between admiration and unease, found himself torn. Should he side with Day's authority or Dusk's defiance? And the palace, once a machine of smooth ritual, began to grind with the friction of suspicion. Dusk, for his part, said nothing. He let the toy do the speaking. He carried it into meetings, let it rest on the table beside him as though it were a silent companion. He polished it in the gardens where others could see, its shine catching the sun and forcing eyes to linger. He never explained its purpose, and that was the true brilliance of his move. The less he said, the more the Empire wondered. The less they knew, the more they feared. Soon, it was not just the palace whispering. Word began to leak beyond the walls, into the city, into the galaxy. Traders spoke of the object, spinning it into legend. Rebels wondered if it could be a weapon that might shift the balance of power. Even the faithful of the Church of the Galactic Spirit whispered that perhaps the object was assigned, a divine omen sent to test the clones. Brother Dusk had not fired a single shot, yet he had started a war. Not a war of soldiers, but a war of meaning. A war of symbols. A war where the sharpest weapon was not steel or fire, but the idea that one man, long dismissed, could still bend the Empire to his will. And as the whispers spread, the brothers began to realize something terrifying. Once unleashed, conflict is not so easily contained. The toy had been unveiled, and with it, a chain of events had been set in motion, events that no one, not even Dusk himself, could fully control. For Brother Dusk, the toy was never just an object. It was never just a polished artifact meant to dazzle wandering eyes. To him, it was a confession of fear, of pride, of loneliness. But it was also a shield against those very weaknesses. Because in the gleam of the toy, he found a way to tell the world what words alone could never say. I still matter. I will not fade quietly. From the moment he was born, Dusk had known his purpose. Like every clone before him, he was raised not to dream, not to question, but to continue the cycle. Dawn rises, day rules, dusk fades. Over and over again, the pattern repeats, designed to protect the illusion of eternal perfection. But to live within such a cycle is to feel the weight of it. Dusk had carried that weight longer than either day or dawn could understand. He had sat on the throne, tasted absolute control, seen the galaxy bow before him. And then, slowly, cruelly, he had been forced to step aside. The dynasty pretended it was a natural rhythm. That Dusk's fall into shadow was graceful, noble, inevitable. But inside him, it felt like decay. To be replaced, to be overlooked. To be remembered only as a pale echo of Cleon's glory, this was a death that came long before the body's end. And so the toy became more than metal in his hands. It became resistance, a refusal to let the cycle erase him. Every time Dusk looked at it, he saw himself, shining, polished, but underestimated. A thing of beauty, but also of danger. A reminder that even what looks harmless can carry sharp edges. Where Day believed power lived in the throne, Dusk believed it lived in memory. The toy was his way of writing his name into history, not through speeches or decrees, but through an image so striking it could not be forgotten. And beneath that, there was something darker. Revenge. Dusk had watched Day mock him, dismiss him, treat him as though he were already dead. He had seen Dawn's youthful eagerness, so full of life, as if the boy believed time would never touch him. And in both of them, Dusk saw the same arrogance he once carried. The arrogance of believing the cycle would always protect them. The toy was his way of breaking that illusion. It was his way of saying, "You think I am nothing, but I will be the crack in your perfect mirror." There was desperation, too, though he would never admit it. The desperation of a man who knows the end is coming, who feels the walls of time closing in. The dynasty tells its brothers that they are eternal, that the chain will never break. But Dusk knew the truth. Nothing lasts forever. Not thrones. Not empires. Not even clones. The toy was his rebellion against that truth. If he could not live forever, then at least his gesture would. The image of him unveiling it, holding it, daring the galaxy to wonder this, would outlive his body. This would be his immortality. It was not the first time an emperor had sought immortality. Statues, temples, Warzich, Cleon before him, had tried to carve his legacy into the galaxy. But Dusk was different. His immortality was not in grand monuments. It was in doubt, in the questions his toy created. What is it? Why did he reveal it? What does it mean? Those questions would ripple outward, multiplying, spreading far beyond the palace walls. And with each whisper, Dusk's shadow would grow longer. The deeper meaning of the toy was not its design, nor its origin, but its silence. It gave no answers, and that silence forced others to create their own. Today it was a threat. To Dawn, a riddle. To the advisors, a warning. To the galaxy, perhaps even a prophecy. In truth, it was all of these things, and none of them. Because for Dusk, the toy was never about the object itself. It was about control over how he was remembered. Control over the narrative of his decline. And in that, he succeeded. For as long as the toy glittered in the Empire's memory, Brother Dusk would never truly be gone. The toy glittered in Dusk's hand, but its shine reached far beyond the palace walls. To the casual eye, it was a curious relic. To the Empire, it was a dangerous omen. In that single unveiling, Dusk had sown something that could not be undone: doubt. And doubt is the enemy the Empire has never been able to conquer. Brother Day, though he did not say it aloud, began to question the loyalty of his own blood. If Dusk could plot in silence, what stopped Dawn from doing the same? What stopped advisors, generals, priests, or even the people from hiding secrets in their own hands? The cycle of clones depended on trust and unshakable belief that each brother was a perfect copy united in purpose. But now, that belief was fractured. For if perfection could rebel, if perfection could conceal, then the illusion of eternal unity was broken. Brother Dawn, restless and young, saw a different path. To him, the toy was not just a threat, but an invitation. He watched how the object transformed Dusk, how it gave him power without a throne. And in that reflection, Dawn saw himself. One day he would rise as day, only to be pushed aside and left in the shadows. Was this toy not proof that the shadows could still fight back? That the cycle was not destiny, but a prison that could be broken? The advisors whispered more urgently now. Some believed the toy would embolden enemies outside the palace. If the galaxy heard that the dynasty was splintering, would the rebels not rise stronger? Would the church not see an opportunity to strike? Even the Foundation itself, that growing flame at the edge of the galaxy, could use this crack in the Empire's armor to widen the wound. A weapon of words, of symbols, of doubt was far more dangerous than fleets and soldiers. And beyond politics, there was something stranger. Rumors began to tie the toy to prophecy. The faithful whispered that Dusk had been chosen, that the object was a sign from the gods. Proof that the Empire's cycle was unnatural, destined to end. Others, in darker corners, muttered that the toy was cursed, that its shine carried ruin. They said it was not a gift to the Empire, but a mirror of its doom. What none of them understood was that Dusk wanted this. He wanted the whispers to spread, wanted the doubt to take root. He knew he would not live to see how far the cracks would spread, but he also knew this: the toy would outlive him. And with each retelling of its unveiling, the story would grow sharper, louder, more dangerous. Perhaps in some distant future, a rebellion would rise not in the name of freedom, but in the memory of Dusk's defiance. Perhaps one day another brother would hold the throne and find the toy waiting for him, shine carrying the ghost of Dusk's laughter. Perhaps the Empire itself would collapse, not from armies, but from the weight of its own fear, seated by a single glittering object. The future had already shifted. With the toy revealed, nothing could return to what it was before. The cycle of Cleons was no longer eternal, it was fragile, vulnerable, human. And the first fracture had been struck not by rebels, not by invaders, but by Brother Dusk himself. The toy was small, but in its shadow, an empire began to tremble. In the grand halls of the imperial palace, words were often drowned by ritual. Speeches were rehearsed, decrees polished, until they lost their bite. Every gesture, every glance, every breath of the brothers was designed to project control. But when Brother Dusk revealed his toy, he did something far more dangerous than issuing an order. He performed. Dusk understood what so many rulers forget, that power is not only in action, but in appearance. An army can conquer planets, but a symbol can conquer time. And so he treated the toy not as an object to be owned, but as a stage to be played. Every unveiling was deliberate. Every movement choreographed to send a message louder than words. He carried the toy into meetings, placing it on the table before him, letting it catch the light as he listened in silence. He did not speak of it. He did not explain it. He let the gleam of its surface whisper louder than any speech. In that silence, others filled the void with their own fears. Was it a weapon? A key? A message? No one knew, and Dusk fed on their uncertainty. In the gardens, he polished it slowly, deliberately, with servants watching from the shadows. He let them see the care in his hands, as though he were tending to something sacred. By the time the story left their lips, the toy had grown into legend. They said it pulsed with hidden power. They said it whispered to him when the palace slept. They said it could topple empires with a touch. To Dusk, these rumors were not a danger, they were the point. The toy itself did not need to destroy. It only needed to be seen. By refusing to define it, Dusk turned it into a mirror. Every man, every woman, every brother who looked upon it saw something different. Their fears, their hopes, their secrets reflected back at them. And so, in a way, the toy became many things at once. Today, it was a threat. To Dawn, it was inspiration. To the people, it was a story. The act of showing it off, of holding it in the open, was Dusk's rebellion against silence. Tradition demanded that Dusk fade gracefully, a shadow shrinking until it vanished. But he refused to fade. With every public gesture, every careful display, he carved himself back into the story of the empire. The toy became his second crown, gleaming brighter than the one on Day's head. And make no mistake, Dusk enjoyed it. The sly curve of his smile whenever eyes lingered too long, the measured pauses when he set it down on a table. The weight of silence before anyone dared to speak was theater, and he was its master. He had turned decline into performance, weakness into spectacle. In truth, the toy itself might not have mattered. What mattered was the way it changed the room. The way conversations faltered when he entered with it. The way rivals grew cautious. The way allies leaned closer. He had transformed himself from the forgotten elder into the most watched man in the palace. And in doing so, he proved something the dynasty had long denied, that power is not about thrones or crowns or bloodlines. Power is about narrative, about who controls the story. And Brother Dusk, with nothing more than a glittering object, had stolen the story for himself.